Good evening, Fort Collins, and welcome to our public forum of our Chief Judge finalists. I should mention that we're on FCTV and channels 14 and 881, and we're also live streaming at fcgov.com. Pursuant to Emergency Ordinance Number 54, 2020, the City Council determined that remote participation by a City Council member, by City staff, and members of the public is required because meeting in person this evening would not be prudent due to current coronavirus concerns and public health agency recommendations and stay-at-home orders. Tonight, all public participation will be done virtually. In a few moments, our host for the night, Tyler Marr, will explain the format that we are using. I am very excited about our two finalists that we have for this critical position in our community and who you'll meet tonight. We had a third finalist withdraw the application. The city launched a statewide search in early 2020 to prepare for the transition of the Chief Judge, Kathleen Lane, who has led our department since 1989. Chief Judge plans to retire on July 4th of this year, and we are very grateful to Judge Lane's remarkable service to our community. In my lifetime, there have only been two Chief Judges for the City of Fort Collins, Judge Tobin and Judge Lane. So this is a remarkable time in our city's history to be doing a search for a Chief Judge. The Chief Judge position is critical to our city, and the position is responsible for leading the judicial branch of our city government according to our ordinances adopted by City Council, and is one of three leadership positions that are appointed by City Council and report to the City Council. City staff engaged a diverse group of stakeholders from the community to gain insight into differing perspectives of the court and the Chief Judge role. A number of those stakeholders have also participated in the selection activities with our finalists this week. We deeply value the thoughtful contributions our partners across the community have incorporated in the priorities into this search. We consider the City of Fort Collins an extraordinary place to live, work, and play, and we recognize the profound impact that a Chief Judge, Municipal Judge, can have on our residents. I am pleased to welcome our Chief Judge finalists, David Cooke and Jill Hughes. They have spent a lot of time with our staff and our stakeholders and our council over the last few days. I can tell you that they each have a lot to offer our city, and I'm proud that they're finalists here tonight. Tyler, would you please explain how the public forum will be facilitated?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Troxell, and good evening, everyone. And thanks to all of you again who are joining us, either here in the Zoom meeting or watching us live on FCTV. We want to hear your feedback tonight on the two candidates and their answers, and you can submit that feedback via our webpage dedicated to this recruitment at ourcity.fcgov.com/chief-judge. One more time, that's ourcity.fcgov.com/chief-judge. You can also find a link to the Chief Judge recruitment page on the city's homepage. We've been soliciting your questions ahead of time via that webpage, and we've also had questions that we heard from our stakeholder groups that were convened for this process. We'll be asking questions from these sources tonight, as well as questions from those of you here in the Zoom meeting. If you have a question, click the Q&A button in your Zoom application and submit your question that way. Staff will be screening these and mixing them in to what we ask the candidates. For those of you who are currently on FCTV, it's not too late to join the Zoom meeting and submit a question. Just visit fcgov.com to find those instructions. In terms of the process, candidates, we'll be allowing 2.5 minutes for each of you to answer the questions. You'll both get a chance to answer every question. I'll keep time and provide a visual cue when you have 30 seconds remaining by turning my video back on. Just a quick note that those of you who are attendees in the Zoom meeting or watching on FCTV likely won't see that visual cue, but it will happen. I'll allow you then, when time's expired, to finish your sentence, and then I'll interject. Just a quick time note, we scheduled this meeting for 90 minutes to allow for some grace with the technology. And so assuming we're able to answer all the questions we want that cover the major themes, we may wrap up a little early. I used a random number generator to determine who will go first. It came up with 2, and so Jill, that means you're first. And so we'll start here with the first question. If you could please introduce yourself to the members of the community and describe your interest in becoming the next Chief Judge for the City of Fort Collins.
Good evening. My name is Jill Hughes, and I am currently the lead prosecutor for the City of Fort Collins. I am also an assistant municipal judge for the City of Greeley and a deputy municipal judge for the City of Loveland. I have long wanted to have a judicial career. It's been a long-term dream of mine. And a couple of years ago, I had that first opportunity to work in Greeley. So I left my full-time employment at the Adams County District Attorney's Office to pursue that option. I was hired on here as the contract prosecutor a couple of years ago, and just fell in love with working for the City of Fort Collins. I think it's a really special place. I think the Fort Collins Municipal Court is a very special court. I love the problem-solving focus, and I've spent the last 2 years working to make the court one that makes an even bigger positive impact in the community. And I want to continue that work and continue to serve the people of Fort Collins as its Chief Judge.
Thanks, Jill. David, go ahead.
Okay. Good evening. My name is David Cooke. I am very excited about this opportunity in Fort Collins. I would say the opportunity to be a municipal judge is really an opportunity to have one of the greatest jobs that there is. You are the face of government to the community. So the municipal court judge gets to represent the values of the community, the things they hold dear, gets to represent the things that matter to that community. Now, that doesn't mean that the judge doesn't make decisions. Of course you do. That's part of it. This is one of those jobs that is one of the hardest jobs I've ever experienced. And I was a presiding judge in the city of Arvada for 6.5 years. I'm currently a relief judge in a couple other jurisdictions. Every day you are presented with novel situations. The law is constantly changing, which makes this a particularly challenging opportunity. You get a chance each day to try to move the process forward. And often that means helping people, particularly homeless folks. You have to have a strong sense of empathy. You have to understand that each person is there for a different reason. People are generally nervous when they come to court. And it's your job to have a cool, calm presence and to listen and to be, I would say, to have empathy, as well as creativity and the intellect required to make this go. Fort Collins is in a unique position right now to have its court, I'd say, jump deeply into problem solving, particularly around homelessness. If anyone read the USA Today article about homelessness, it was about Fort Collins. And I think that this court has a great opportunity to get into what are called problem-solving courts. I think the timing is actually perfect. And I have deep experience with that in Arvada, where we had a homeless court that we called One Small Step. So I think that the time is right to have some bold innovation. And that's what I would ask to bring to Fort Collins if I'm given this opportunity.
Great, thank you both. So David, we'll stick with you for the start of the next question. What insights have you gained about our community and municipal court over the past few days of interviewing?
It's been incredible. I gained insights, I would say, a long time ago when I saw this job. The first thing I did was read the City of Fort Collins strategic plan. And in the plan, that really shows what's important to the city. That's where the city leadership, city council, department heads, public gets to weigh in on what's important now, what's important in the future. Fort Collins has a strong sense of stewardship, a strong sense of equity. Then I also read the city's budget. And when you compare the budget to the strategic plan, that tells you if they really mean it. And Fort Collins means it. They put the money behind the strategic plan every single step of the way. That shows to me financial commitment, commitment on the part of the community. I got to meet several department heads, chief of police, the court administrator, and I got to get a sense of what's happening in court. And I would say one real clear signal I got from court is that they are working furiously over there. They are under a lot of stress, and these are resource constraints. But I think it's also the court staff is extremely experienced, extremely capable. And I think that they're in it for the long haul. In fact, I know they are. So I got to see that. And as I got to speak with department heads, every single person is the greatest ambassador for the city of Fort Collins and the great things that it has to offer. And of course, Fort Collins itself is a great city. It's certainly my favorite city in Colorado. It's got a lot to offer, but the people themselves and the leadership, I think, are just remarkable in their excellence and their commitment.
Thanks, David. Jill, go ahead.
Well, for me, I'm in a little bit of a different situation because I have been working with the city for the last 2 years. So I have been immersed in municipal court and in some of these projects and changes that we have been doing and innovating there. So the last few days have just reinforced the things I've learned over the last few years. Fort Collins Municipal Court is an incredible problem-solving court and a leader in the state of Colorado, from our special agency session to our newly launched probation program, to some of the ideas we've been exploring, like an outreach court to take court to where the people are. What I really love about Fort Collins, and what has really been reinforced as I've gotten to speak with different leaders in the organization, is just the fact that Fort Collins truly cares about the people it serves and the people who serve it. It is a special community, and yes, we have issues that we're struggling with, and this is a time of uncertainty, but it is a unique and special organization. I've gotten to serve in Greeley and Loveland as well, which are both northern Colorado areas, but I think Fort Collins Municipal Court is uniquely focused on problem solving and on reaching our vulnerable communities, and really reaching out that hand, connecting people with resources, and using the court as a means to make that connection and put someone to where they're having a positive experience and where they end up in a better situation than when they came in. I got to have some very frank conversations with members of court staff about the things I don't see because I'm not part of the court staff. I interact with them a lot, and about what they see in this role and what they need and want from their next chief judge, and the kind of advocacy and partnerships that the next chief judge will have the opportunity to build. I've spent the last 2 years building partnerships with other areas of the city and with nonprofits in the city and trying to improve the court that way. And so I'm really excited that the municipal court staff is ready to go and shares that vision.
Thank you, Jill. So we'll stick with you. I think you both touched on a little bit of this next question, but what do you believe is the role of municipal court within the community? And what challenges and opportunities does municipal court face? And how would you work to optimize that role of the court?
So as David said earlier, the court is often the face of the city of Fort Collins to a lot of people. People come into court and it can be anything from as simple as a traffic ticket to something very significant. And even a traffic ticket can feel very significant to the people who come in. So first and foremost, our job as a municipal court is to provide great customer service and to treat every person who comes through the court with the respect and professionalism that they deserve. Our job is to work consistently and give fair and equitable outcomes in an efficient manner. Now, we do have a lot of people in the city of Fort Collins who are experiencing homelessness and struggling with that. And I believe that a court's place is to innovate and to be creative and to work to continuously improve so that we can reach these populations and reach out a hand to them and connect them with resources and give them opportunities to end up better positioned to address their own needs in the community. So I love what we're doing with special agency session. I see a lot of opportunity for growth with the probation department that we have just launched. I'm really excited that we can partner with other organizations. I would love to see us do an outreach court, which would be holding court one day a month at either the Rescue Mission or at the Catholic Charities. It's something that Colorado Springs has instituted recently, and we sent kind of a fact-finding mission down there right before everything had to shut down. So I'm excited to hear what they bring back and see whether that would be feasible in our community. Because the current situation is such that things are not going to be better for our individuals who have been struggling when we come through this COVID-19 issue, and things are not going to be better for the people who were barely hanging on before this started. So I believe the court is uniquely positioned to step in as an intervention tool in order to equip people to address the issues that they need to in order to be able to move back into the community and be able to be better positioned in the community. So I really have a heart for the people we've been working with. I really get excited about the success stories, and I look forward to working towards more successes and continuing to address that.
Thank you, Jill. David, go ahead.
Well, the role of court is complex. The court is a department of the city government. So it's a part of the organization where you have employees, people who are often residents of the community. The court is also the place that people look to uphold, to interpret the law. I have a little acronym that I use, and that is, it's RIO, it's RIO. The court needs to demonstrate respect for the employees of the court, respect for the police, prosecutors, public defenders, etc., and for the defendants. The court needs to respect the law. The law is changing faster now than I think it has ever. The last 3 or 4 years have caused municipal courts in particular to have to change how they do advisement, to change how they accept pleas. The municipal court now looks more like a county court, but with fewer resources. The constraints, I think, are getting tighter and tighter. But the court also needs to have integrity. That is, it needs to have these records that are reliable, that can be relied upon. It needs to have integrity of process. People need to trust that the law is being followed in the court, despite the fact that the law is changing constantly. And it needs to have an outcome focus. That is, the court needs to have an end in mind when it comes to sentencing, when it comes to dealing with the defendants, particularly indigent defendants. But the court's in a unique position to collaborate. The court has the opportunity to collaborate with the police department through the city manager, to collaborate with the faith-based providers in the community, to collaborate with other service providers. A lot of people look to the court for that type of leadership, to say, how can we make this thing happen? That's been my experience in Arvada, where I have literally coordinated with the local community college to help some of our homeless folks on job finding and job search. What I found, a lot of times all you have to do is ask. Other times people approach the court because they understand that the court is there to be this conduit or this connector. So I would say that the role is complex, but I think each of the several things the court has to do is very important.
Thank you, David. Just a quick reminder for those watching on FCTV or in the Zoom meeting who may have joined a little late, we are very interested in your feedback tonight on our 2 candidates. If you could, to submit that feedback, go to ourcity.fcgov.com/chief-judge. And I'll repeat that again later in the meeting, but please be thinking about your feedback. All right, so next question, David, we're going to stick with you. A growing number of municipal court defendants have difficulty complying with the law or with orders of the court due to lack of stable housing, addiction issues, mental health disorders, or some combination of the above. How have you prepared yourself to be an effective municipal judge in that type of environment?
That is a big problem. I've done several things. In Arvada, we implemented what's called the One Small Step Court. That is a specialty court for homeless people. It was really driven in large part by the city attorney's office, and I was happy to participate with them and coordinate with them. As I study this homeless issue, and I study the mental health component of it and the addiction component of it, it's clear to me that this is a time for what are called wraparound services. I think the way you're going to get the best outcome for defendants in these situations is by giving them access to resources. I was on a seminar today with the U.S. Department of Justice and the Center for Court Innovation, and it was called Police Court Partnership in Addressing Homelessness. And I listened to this, and it was clear to me that it's this integrated approach, this wraparound approach that works. And we've been doing this in Arvada, and we've been doing it for a long time. That's the only way you're going to get success. If people come in and they just don't even know the next step, they're not going to be successful. Another thing that I have found helpful in dealing with our homeless court is having defense counsel available. I have observed over 6.5 years of being a judge that where there is the presence of an attorney, that attorney often can act as a guide. And I'm not suggesting that we just go out and start hiring court-appointed counsel willy-nilly, but I think that that's a piece of the system that gets these defendants to be able to comply with the conditions, the orders of a sentence more effectively and more successfully.
Thanks, David. Jill, go ahead.
So I am incredibly aware and sensitive to the fact that a lot of people are struggling with experiencing homelessness, experiencing mental health issues, experiencing substance abuse and alcohol abuse disorders, and sometimes multiple of those at the same time. I like some of the tools we already have, like special agency session, where we screen each person that we identify as experiencing homelessness to come into the program. It's a partnership between the court, city attorney's office, the police services is involved. And then we have an amazing case manager who comes alongside individuals and meets their individual needs. It is a tailored program where they set their own goals. One thing we've run into sometimes is that they're setting goals, but they don't want to address, the substance abuse or the alcohol abuse problem. And so they're not able to address these other goals until they get that squared away. So I'm really excited that we have probation as that step. I'm really passionate about individuals who have mental health problems and whose behavior is stemming from those problems, because I think that that's an area that we as a society are failing people. And the criminal justice system is not the best equipped system to handle those cases, but it's where we are and we have to play the hand we're dealt. So I believe in constantly innovating and looking for ways to match people with the right services and the right resources that are going to be meeting them where they are right now. I love the idea of having a wellness court in municipal court. I love the idea of having a drug court in municipal court, and I love the idea of having outreach court to meet people where they are. A lot of that is going to be looking at these ideas, finding evidence-based ways to integrate the things that are working in other courts and integrate them into our courts, and looking at what we can do with the budget we have and the resources that we have available to us, picking the thing that is going to make the biggest impact. The thing is, I love these successes and I can't take credit for them, but when I see someone who maybe goes to Fort Lyon and is just doing great, or gets into housing and is just doing great, it's because they did the work. But I like, as a judge and as a prosecutor, having the opportunity to be a part of positioning them so they have the opportunity to succeed in those areas.
Thank you, Jill. For those of our community members who are in the Zoom meeting, please keep those questions coming using the Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen. We're seeing those and we are integrating them into what we're asking tonight, so please keep asking your questions. Jill, we'll start with you for the next question. The city offers community mediation and restorative justice programming, and the court currently refers some types of tickets to these programs for resolution. How have you used similar programs in the past, and what opportunities do you see to leverage that type of programming?
So at both DA's offices that I've worked at, we have had diversion programs, some at the misdemeanor level and some at the felony level. I think they're a really effective method of diverting cases, and that's similar to what we do with restorative justice and with mediation. We end up doing what we style as a deferred prosecution, where we essentially don't move forward with the prosecution if they participate in restorative justice and mediation. I think they're a great opportunity for a lot of the violations that we deal with, especially we have, a college campus, we have some youthful offenders who come in, and some people who are not college students who are committing the same type of offenses. We look at stuff like our underage possession of alcohol, and we partner not only with the city's restorative justice, but with the CSU Resolution Center, so that both types of individuals get the same type of services and resources to address that issue. I think restorative justice is a great tool. I think mediation is a great tool. I see an expanded role for them going forward as we continue to build these partnerships in the city. And I think that there are a lot of cases that are appropriate for those resolutions. When I am working as a judge, what I love to say is that the more tools I have in my tool belt to look at an individual and figure out how I can best serve both the community and the individual, the better off I am. So I love that we have a mediation, we have restorative justice, we have the CSU Resolution Center, and then we have our specialty court, and we have probation. All these resources are incredible, and they just reflect the vision of the Fort Collins Municipal Court to truly serve the individuals who come into our court, and to make the best decisions all around for the community and the individual.
Thank you, Jill. David, go ahead.
Well, I agree with Jill. I think she really has identified the important factors, the important opportunities. There's no disagreement or argument. I think restorative justice, which, by the way, is also consistent with the state law affecting state courts. So if you look at Title 18, I think it's Section 201, where they talk about the sentencing objectives. One of those objectives is restoration of the community of the individual defendant. I have participated, had access to mediation programs for the entire time I have been on the bench. I've been on the board of a program. It's called the Youth Drug and Alcohol Prevention Board. It's with the 1st Judicial District. but it's across all of the communities in Jefferson and Gilpin County. And this is a diversion program as well. It's been extremely effective, generally minor in possession, both alcohol and marijuana. It's an example of some of the great things you can do. I also tend to encourage the prosecutor to use the discretion that they have. It's been my experience that we all sort of fall into a routine, but I think the prosecutors, once they get comfortable that they can really initiate a lot of diversion, they've got a lot of authority to limit people's interaction with the criminal justice system. And evidence-based sentencing and evidence-based research has shown that for certain low-risk defendants, you want them out of the system as soon as possible. And this is a place where prosecutorial discretion comes in. So I agree with Jill on this. I think that this community-based is just nothing but opportunity and upside. It also is a chance for members of the community to participate. When I'm out meeting with folks at the Rotary Club, they always ask, what can I do to get involved? And I think that we can all find ways to get these folks who are looking for valuable things to do to contribute to the community, give them these opportunities. And it provides an additional resource at no cost. But I agree, these are all very good things that are improving the overall quality of life for the community and certainly improving the overall quality of justice.
Thank you both for those answers. Our next question, and David, we'll start with you again. Sorry for this ping pong we're playing a little bit, but what experience do you have in administrative work, management of the judgeship office, and budget skills, along with being a judge? Do you have any civil law experience?
My turn, Tyler? Yes, I have an immense amount of civil law experience, measured in decades. I was on the Edgewater City Council. I was council president for 4 years, and I had to manage a municipal budget. And Edgewater is a small city, but it's a home rule city that is next to Denver. So it had all of the issues that would pour over from Denver. So at the time, we were a council mayor form of government, and as president of the council, I had to manage the municipal budget process 4 years in a row, which meant extended budget hearings line by line. So I'm extremely familiar with how municipal budgets work. I also have managed large teams. In addition to managing a staff of 12 people in the Arvada Municipal Court for 6.5 years, I also managed the largest civil rights practice in Colorado, and that's the Denver City Attorney's Office. I managed the civil litigation group, which was 12 trial lawyers handling Section 1983 civil rights cases and Colorado governmental immunity cases, as well as about a dozen support staff and supervisors. I had to manage the budget every year. I had to deal with trained professionals constantly. So this is not new to me at all. My staff in Arvada is probably a little bit larger than the staff in Fort Collins. Our docket, a little larger. I think we probably handle 12 to 14,000 cases a year, which is slightly larger than Fort Collins. So this is very familiar territory for me. Also, in other iterations, I've been on boards that managed sort of nonprofits and things like this. So this is pretty familiar territory for me, Tyler.
Thanks, David. Jill, go ahead.
As far as administrative and budget experience, my experience is not as great. I was here in Fort Collins the last time we went through a budgeting for outcomes process, so I have some familiarity with that and with the different strategic objectives of the city and how we approach the budget here. I also did serve on the board of a child's place in Weld County, and I was one of the officers on that board. So we did work through our budget, a small nonprofit budget, admittedly, but a very important budget and very close to my heart. So I have a little bit of experience with that. I am a current supervisor with the city, and I have gone through managing at the city training. I supervise the prosecution team here, and I've been doing that for the last 1.5 years. As far as civil experience, about 3 of my 13 years of attorney experience have been in the civil realm, and I practiced everything from products liability to consumer finance litigation to securities litigation to employment law. I also did a little bit of white collar criminal defense, and I did a pro bono asylum case. So I have a pretty broad base in that civil experience. Most of my experience is criminal, and I actually think that serves me well in this capacity because the vast majority of the cases that come into our municipal court here our traffic and misdemeanor cases. I believe we do about 12,000 of those combined each year. And so I have great familiarity, obviously, with the city of Fort Collins and our code. And because the stakes in criminal cases are quite a bit higher, and because our criminal case docket is quite a bit more substantial, and our civil infraction docket is quite a bit more substantial than our civil case docket, I consider it a good thing that my balance skews a little bit towards the criminal law, and of course 2 years of judicial experience. And the rules of evidence are the same with both civil and criminal law. So I believe that actually puts me into a good position to move into this. I have only supervised a few people. Admittedly, that would be stepping into a bigger role for me, but I am an experienced leader and honorably discharged Marine, so I do have a lot of leadership training.
Thank you. Our next question has to do with Colorado State University. So Jill, we'll start with you. What challenges do you anticipate for the court with Colorado State located in the center of the city? And what experience do you have working with university communities? And then as a secondary part, what opportunities come with having CSU as our partner?
So I have worked with CSU Police Department, and I've done trainings there in partnership with Patty Netherton, who's the court administrator, to reach out and make sure that everyone's on the same page, that they know what happens when they write a ticket into municipal court and how it is handled. I see CSU as a great partner in our community. We do get tickets out of there from college students who commit violations. And one of the things that I've met with the people at the CSU Student Resolution Center, and what we've talked about is using that resolution center to make it so that when students offend, they're doing the same type of treatment or the same type of classes or the same type of requirements that someone who's not a student in the community would have to do, but they're also fulfilling their student conduct requirements at the same time. So we've had really productive meetings on that level to talk about what our expectations are from the court and from the city attorney's office as to what that's going to look like. When we have someone who has an underage possession of alcohol or an underage possession of marijuana charge who comes into our court, we're going to partner with them to make it so that it's still fair and equitable, and it's consistent with what someone who's not a student would be doing, but so that it's easily accessible to them and they can do it on campus. Certainly, we have an influx of young people, but I see CSU as a positive thing in the community. I think that it's great having the college here, and they have been really good partners with us and really good at communicating with us here in municipal court. So I don't have any complaints about them.
Thanks, Jill. David, your turn.
Well, I haven't dealt with CSU, but I agree that one of the things that makes Fort Collins great is the dynamic that comes from being a college town. That's what keeps things vibrant. That's what keeps things interesting and just really alive. I have had a lot of experience with colleges in general, though. And, you know, one of the big things we see with CSU and elsewhere is minors in possession. That's classic. I have extensive experience dealing with minors in possession, having been on a board for 6.5 years that was in charge of a diversion program. I've also worked with other colleges, including Red Rocks Community College. I'm on the board for the criminal justice program for Warren Tech High School, which is part of the Red Rocks Community College. So I'm involved in the college environment. I meet with the dean and assistant deans frequently to talk about how our court might be integrated or integral to some of the work that they do. Up in Fort Collins, they've got a great program. You can see everything from a student court to really a student administered justice. I think that's great stuff. We had a program in Arvada for quite a while that was called Teen Court. And I was involved in some of the training. I presided over a lot of the cases, worked with the different stakeholders involved. And this is just good stuff. It also gives people in the educational system a chance to really try on parts of the criminal justice system. So while someone may start out being in trouble at CSU, they also will get an experience that shows them how criminal justice works, that it is fair, that it is responsible, that it is accountable. So I often see actually a silver lining to a lot of these types of cases and actions.
Thank you both for those answers. So David, we're going to stick with you. Our next question is, resources in the community can work with the court to create opportunities for sentencing alternatives and approaches that lead to longer-term solutions for individuals and that accomplish city policy objectives. Can you describe your experience working with community service systems that support the needs of a person with behavioral and mental health issues and other special needs?
Yeah, I've actually been fortunate enough to have quite a lot of experience. I've been involved. One of the largest faith-based providers in Arvada is called the Rising Church, and they handle and they service a big part of the homeless population. And so I meet with the leadership of the Rising frequently. I've been in several panels and working groups with them to talk about it. They're already doing the work, and I think it's a good start. It's a good thing generally. As I think I mentioned, I've had a lot of cooperative collaboration experience with Red Rocks Community College for helping homeless defendants with job finding and things like this. They have stepped up. When I meet with social groups, everything from Kiwanis to Rotary to Chambers of Commerce, they want to be a part of it. I have been in a Chamber of Commerce working group on homelessness and job finding, where we share points of view, we share opportunities. When the time is right, I've sent people over to the Chamber because they've got a huge job skills development program. It's just robust. And a lot of the employers in the area are looking for people. And they're not afraid to invest. They're not afraid to take that risk. And working with the Chamber, I've had great experience watching those opportunities emerge. I also have good relationships with the Jefferson County Mental Health Director Harriet Hall, who's just stepped down. I'm well acquainted with her, so that when we call over there, we can get things to happen. We also established a post-sentence services surcharge in Arvada of $2 per ticket. And it gave us a fund to get people over the hurdle who maybe couldn't afford an evaluation to get into treatment. And these are folks who often were Medicaid covered or Medicaid eligible, but they couldn't afford the eval. So by setting up this fund, and I worked with the city council, I worked with the city manager, the chief financial officer, the city attorney, that allowed us to get folks access to these systems where there was, let's say, that $200 obstacle to get to the treatment. So I'd say we've been in pretty deep on it.
Thanks, David. Jill?
I have had an incredible opportunity to work in partnership and coordination with some of our local wonderful service providers here in the city of Fort Collins. I've been in communication with both shelters and get reports from them on somewhat how things are going. I think sometimes our mental health services and our substance abuse services go hand in hand. But like I said, I am very passionate about helping people who are suffering from mental health issues. I think when we deinstitutionalize mental health services as a society, we did not provide the support and the resources that we needed to for people, and they have ended up in the revolving door of the criminal justice system instead. So when I was in Adams County, we had a great program called CEASE. It was comparable to Larimer County's Wellness Court. That is something I would like to investigate doing to the municipal court, or even partnering with county court when we have an individual maybe who's had a lot of cases with us where we have seen this pattern, but they only have one case over in county court, to be able to reach out and identify them as someone who might benefit from those services. I like to tell the individual success stories and the pending success stories, as I like to call them. And I know we had one individual here in municipal court who had a lot of cases with us, a lot of cases in the tens in the last couple of years. And it was pretty clear this person had been in special agency session and it had not worked out, because sometimes mental health issues mean that you're not, the symptom of it is that you can't address the mental health issue. And so even though there was this lengthy history, when this person's attorney said that they thought this person was ready to do a mental health evaluation and to engage in that treatment, we did extend a probation offer, and we're really excited. And I've heard positive reports on progress, and that just makes me so excited. I think we have an incredible case manager in Ms. Aiken and a great new probation officer in Ms. Felix, who are ready to come alongside individuals and who partner really well with those resources to bring them into the court.
Thank you, Jill. Our next question switches gears a little bit and involves the relationships with internal city staff. So Jill, we'll start with you again. How do you describe the relationships between chief judge, city prosecutors, and the police department? And if you can tell us how these relationships are best approached by the chief judge. If you have an example of an approach that you've taken in fostering these relationships, please share. And if not, what steps would you expect to take to establish them here in Fort Collins?
So one thing is obviously a judge's job is to be impartial and not show favoritism when ruling on cases. And that's important to have that amount of separation to where you're not being influenced in your decisions on cases by any sort of relationship. That said, police services and the court and the city attorney's office have some shared goals and some shared space that they can work together in. A lot of that, for instance, happens with the specialty courts. We have officers who come to that specialty court every time we meet to give input and encouragement and to be a presence to say, hey, we all want to see you succeed. The police want to see you succeed. The court wants to see you succeed, and the prosecutors want to see you succeed. I also think another area of partnership is when we are looking at legislation coming down from the state level and evaluating it and thinking about how is it going to affect the court? How is it going to affect the prosecutors? How is it going to affect the way we're able to do business in the municipal court? And being able to prepare that information and bring it to city council for them to make the policy decisions that are within their sphere. One of the things we've done in municipal court is Ms. Netherton, who's the court administrator, and myself have partnered together to go out and do trainings with police just so that they know what happens to a ticket when they write it into municipal court, and they know what kinds of cases we're handling and what our statistics look like and how we're processing through that. So I think there are areas of partnership with these departments of the city. There's also to take care to make sure that those relationships are not overshadowing the primary duty of a judge, which is to be an impartial person in the courtroom deciding cases based only on the things that are appropriate to decide cases on and not on any personal feelings that they have as far as those relationships go. I do see those bridges continuing and those partnerships continuing in the areas that we all have those shared goals. And I think that when it gets down to it, every one of those groups, the prosecutors, the judges, and the police, we want to see a positive impact in the community to come from the municipal court. And so that's where we come together.
Thank you, Jill. David?
Well, I agree with Jill, of course, on we have to have a bright line. And I think that's not particularly difficult. But this is criminal justice is a system, and we're all part of a system, and we do have many common goals. When I first became a judge, I guess almost 7 years ago, I had conversations with the chief of police and the city manager, city attorney, and prosecutors, and we decided that it would be a good thing to establish what came to be called the Justice Committee. So every couple of months, we would sit down, usually over lunch, and talk about things such as Jill talked about, legislative developments and how they were going to impact the court and the police. And it provided an opportunity, number one, to learn from the police department some of the leading edge issues that they were seeing out on the street. It also gave the police department a chance to learn from the court what we were seeing in terms of how legislation was impacting how we were able to do our jobs. I found that this collaboration was just really valuable. Having the prosecutor there and the city attorney there really let us all realize that we shared a lot in common. I don't think anyone ever feared that there was an infringement on impartiality or anything else. We just all valued the opportunity to share our insights and our points of view. So that's one thing that I suppose I would encourage in Fort Collins is to find those appropriate times to sit down and really share ideas. But Jill struck on something, and that is the judge has to be up on the law. I am part of the Colorado Municipal Judges Association. I was president of the association a year ago, and I'm part of the strategic steering group that addresses legislation in the state. That's critically important. And in that role, I routinely advise city council on legislation that was coming, on legislation that had happened, and cases, case law developments and how that was impacting the court. That is critical. Again, I've been lucky enough to form relationships with these judges around the state, so we keep each other informed of the leading edge practice of stuff. But that is very important, and I think it's good where time permits to keep counsel up to speed to the extent they've got the bandwidth to hear about it. So that's been my approach.
Thank you both for those answers. Next question was submitted tonight via Zoom. Do you favor holding night court for those whose working situation does not allow for them to make traditional hours? David, I'll start with you.
I think night court is a great opportunity. We used to wrestle with this in Arvada constantly. We had one council member, Don Allard, who he thought night court was going to be the deal. They do night court down in Denver, and it's a massive call. I mean, it's hundreds of people that come in down there. I think there is an opportunity, but what I think is probably going to happen instead is I think as we see developments in the process, we may not need night court. I wouldn't rule it out, and I'd be up for it. I think it's great. But I think as we see an expansion maybe of plea by mail opportunities, these penalty assessment tickets that are out there, I think we're slowly chipping away at the need for many cases to have to come to the court physically to resolve things. As we look at this, and I would intend to collaborate with the prosecutor, with the city attorney, to find ways that would allow people not to have this be so immensely disruptive. Now, I would say on the other hand, when you get a summons and complaint, that's the ticket, some of the consequences are you are going to be inconvenienced. That is what happens when you don't comply with the ordinance of the city. And one of these inconveniences is often having to show up at court. But I certainly wouldn't rule out night court, but I think there may be other things that are going to sort of supplant that as a great solution.
Thanks, David. Jill, go ahead.
My short answer is yes, I do support the idea of night court. In fact, it's something I've had conversations with people in the city about the possibility of doing this. And the reason I support it is this. We have a lot of tickets that are either traffic misdemeanors or misdemeanors, and that the law requires a certain level of advisement for these individuals to ensure that they understand their rights and the consequences of the plea that they are entering. And we don't want the court to be something that interferes with employment. We don't want the court to be something that interferes with being able to take care of your children. We don't want the court to be interfering with going to school. When people are doing things that are positive for our community, and with these uncertain economic times, I don't want court to interfere with someone going to a job interview if they get a job interview and they're experiencing unemployment. So I think it's a great idea. What we've talked about is saying have night court once or twice a month and tell people when they get their tickets that if they wish to address it at night court before that, they can contact the court and come into any of the night court dates before that ticket date, before that arraignment date for their ticket. We do want to make sure people are fully apprised of their rights and that they're given that fair and full opportunity to be heard on these tickets. We also don't want to make it any more painful or inconvenient than it has to be. I do believe there are consequences and there's accountability, but I think the accountability is the same whether you're able to come to court at a time when you don't have to take time off work or risk losing your job or miss an interview or figure out something for your childcare, and have that accountability piece, but make it so that court is more accessible and inclusive to people who have determinants that are making it harder for them to come to court than it is for other people. I want to make court as accessible as possible. Now, whether that's going to work with our budget and staffing, I don't know, but I would love to explore that and see if it is a feasible opportunity for us to expand the availability of court for the people who need to be there.
Thank you. I'm going to take this opportunity to give our candidates a chance to breathe. With only two of them, this feels more like a sprinting marathon than a long, well-paced marathon. So I'm going to take the opportunity to just remind folks, anyone watching on FCTV or in the Zoom meeting, about the opportunity to provide feedback tonight. And we are very curious. The City Council wants to hear your feedback. And so if you go to ourcity.fcgov.com/chief-judge, you can easily submit your comments there, and we would welcome those. So just encourage you all to do that. All right, Dave and Jill, we're rounding the corner here. We've got a few more questions, most of which have come in through Zoom. So thank you all for submitting your questions. So Jill, back to you. What would you do to coordinate with county and district courts and the DA's office on common defendants to ensure successful outcomes for defendants and community safety?
So one of the things I'd like to see is more communication with the county court judges and the district court judges about the programs they have available and the programs we have available. We had one person come into the special agency session, for instance, who said, had a case over in county court, and the DA over there said that they would, I think, give a deferred if he came into the special agency session program. We were so excited to hear that the DAs over in county court had heard about our program and were in fact starting to utilize it with defendants that we have in common. As I said earlier, I think sometimes because we are a city-based court and because we see a different type of violation, we may know a little more about an individual than they do over in county court, where they have more cases and a bigger area to cover. So I like to see that communication. I like to know what programs they're doing and what's working for them, and let them know what programs we have and what's working for us. We don't want to make duplicative stuff. So if they're on probation over there, we want to support that. Or if they're on probation with us, we'd like to see the support from that over there. The other thing is there are some programs that affect both of our people. The medication-assisted treatment program that the Larimer County Jail has started, I am really excited about that for individuals with substance abuse disorders. And I would like to see a partnership on how we're tracking that data and seeing if that is transitioning to community-based treatment and making sure that we're coordinating on that, because I think it's a great idea and an innovative idea where Larimer County is leading the way and Fort Collins can be part of that for the people that we are serving. So I love to see that kind of stuff. I think there's more chances for trainings, judicial trainings, and for partnership with them, with people that we are seeing in both courts, and making sure that we are communicating what we're both trying to do, rather than doing duplicative work or kind of pulling in too many different directions and creating more obstacles to success than we need to.
Thanks, Jill. David?
Well, I think Jill has identified, I would say, a lot of the opportunity and a lot of the problem. As I'm sitting here listening, I'm realizing that I've been pretty spoiled as a judge for the last 6.5 years. The first judicial district has had what's called the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee. And that's a committee with the district attorney, public defender, probation, human services, mental health, district court judges, county court judges, municipal courts, as well as other service providers. And I was on the executive committee of that group as well. And we met every single month and talked about these type of issues. And it was great that I could sit next to the sheriff and talk about what's going on with the overcrowding in jails, talk about the jail release bill impact on the court. It was just great to be able to say, well, hey, Sheriff, let me tell you how this impacts us here in the court. I understand the impact on you. Are you aware of A, B, C, D? So I think that there's certainly opportunity up in Larimer County. I think one thing Jill hit on that's great, probation can be great connectors. I have found that the probation folks tend to really communicate well, sort of online and offline. I have observed probation contact the state office, whether county court or district court, to say, what's going on with this defendant? Or are you aware of this and this? So I've had times where prosecutors have brought forth packages to the court where they've said, hey, look, we've had these communications. We think this is an opportunity to either have the state court handle it, namely at county, or to have the municipal court handle it, and county will essentially trail the docket. A lot of this is communication. I think one thing that I'm seeing an opportunity now is to reach out to the presiding judge for district, to reach out to the county court judges, and to go talk with the sheriff. Again, we just have so many interests and aims in common. And I think Jill nailed it. You don't want to be duplicative. Number one, it's wasteful, and it doesn't make it twice the impact for a defendant. It just means you've taken two steps that weren't coordinated. So I agree with her on that part as well.
Thank you both for those answers. So I've liked all these questions. I'm particularly excited to hear your answers to this next one. During the interviews, each of you spoke about why you feel called to be a municipal judge. Why you feel called to be a municipal judge. We would welcome you sharing those thoughts with everyone watching tonight. So David, go ahead and go first.
Well, it sounds kind of trite to say I'm called to this, but I've had a lot of great opportunities, and I've never seen anything like being a municipal court judge. We handle as many cases as the county handles. We do it with fewer resources. It is a chance to put your heart, your brain, everything to work every single day. It's a chance to try to impact outcomes for defendants every day. It is, as I've described it, it is the worst job you will ever love. It is frustrating. It makes you sad. It can make you angry in a sense. You're frustrated constantly. But you get to go home at the end of the day and say, I had a chance today to try to make a difference. There aren't a lot of jobs like that in this world, but you get to go home every day, sometimes a little bit deflated, to say, well, I tried, but I know it didn't work. But there just aren't many chances where you get to do that, where you get to talk to your kids and say, hey, girls, guess what happened today? Let me tell you about what we did for this particular person who was in court. Let me tell you about a solution that we brought to bear that we never tried before. Let me tell you how we got to innovate, how we got to just sort of be curious and creative and clever to benefit somebody. It's just remarkable. But what I have found is that this uses, I think, more of your brain cells than anything I've ever experienced before. The opportunities to collaborate are just magnificent. But again, I would say it is absolutely the worst job that you would ever just love. It's fantastic work.
Thank you, David. Jill, how about you?
Well, one piece of it for me is just that I love being in public service. I've done private practice and I've done public service, and public service energizes me and motivates me in a way I just can't describe. I've served my country as a Marine. I've served communities as a teacher and a deputy district attorney. And now I've had the honor of serving as both a judge and a prosecutor in these Northern Colorado communities. And I find it incredibly fulfilling. It has been a lifelong goal of mine. I won't say lifelong, law school long goal of mine to pursue a judicial career. And that's because I believe we need judges who are truly dedicated to pursuing as perfect of justice as we can get in a fallible human system. And I am a person who is dedicated to working hard and continuous improvement and really brutal self-honesty to ensure that I am upholding the values of the bench and the values of the city. Now, why I think this job is such an incredible opportunity is because I care so deeply about this court. I care so deeply about the direction we're going, and I've been working for the last 2 years on things that I think will make this court and this community better. And, I've done things like reclassified over 40 municipal misdemeanors here to petty offenses to ensure that we are being fair and equitable in our treatment of people. I have seen the impact this court can have and the positive impact this court can have. And being a part of that and being able to lead that would just be an incredible honor. I love the justice system. I love the law. I love the city of Fort Collins. It is truly where my heart is, and I believe that this court has such great power to be a positive force. The chance to be the face of the city when people come in, and often I say, the court may be their one and only contact with city employees sometimes. And people come in and a traffic ticket is a big deal. To be able to be there and be there as an educator and a source of calm, and to help them through that process and make sure they understand their rights and get to be part of that process is just hugely fulfilling to me. I do love the challenge of it and the questions we get asked and the decisions we have to make. But I just believe it would be the greatest honor of my life if I were selected for this.
Thank you. I appreciate those answers. So before I ask the next question, I just want to say it's quickly becoming clear that we will not be able to ask all the questions we received, both in the pre-submittals and through Zoom tonight. So thank you for your questions, and just want everyone who's watching to know we're doing our best to balance by topic area and who's asking sort of what is actually getting asked of the candidates. So thank you for your questions. I just want to say that as we near the end here tonight. So the next question, Jill, this one's yours to start with. We received a follow-up on sort of both of your restorative justice answers. So the question is, in other communities, restorative justice processes are used in many different parts of the justice system. In this community, restorative justice has been used primarily for first-time offending young people with misdemeanors. In what new or innovative ways could you envision using restorative justice?
Well, that's a good question. And that's one we have talked, I have talked to restorative justice people about what other kinds of offenses we could extend this to. Part of it is the types of offenses that are written into municipal court. The ones that have been most appropriate for restorative justice are things like theft and criminal mischief. And it's just something where it's easy to identify who needs to sit down and do this. But I could definitely see expanding this to possibly a higher age group. We do tend to do restorative justice more on first-time offenders, but there may be offenders who have been here before who could still very much benefit from those processes. And so that would be something we'd have to work in partnership with our restorative justice partners to determine what they are looking to expand into. They have typically wanted to look at a lot of the property crimes that we see, and so that has been our focus. And part of it's going to be seeing, can we expand their budget and can we expand their reach? Can we find other restorative justice programs that might work? CSU does have a restorative justice program as well. And I know that we have talked to them, and I have talked to them about whether there are other offenses that may be referred to them. One of the things they've asked about is unreasonable noise and whether that might be a good target for restorative justice. And it may well be if we can craft it in a way that is fair and equitable to everyone that's involved. But I definitely see a lot of potential for restorative justice practices and for innovating in that space. One of the things we've also talked about is using restorative justice in natural areas violations, for instance, in helping to maintain our community's beautiful natural spaces and parks, and having that be part of the process of restorative justice for individuals who commit that type of violation.
Thank you, Jill. David, go ahead.
The potential for restorative justice is immense. I was always, I would say, a little disappointed that it tended to be limited to first-time offenders, particularly on minor and possession cases. I would see cases routinely where a young person maybe had a violation when they were 15 years old, and maybe now they're back and they're 18. And I always thought it was kind of a shame that they didn't get another chance. I think that there is something to be said for how juvenile brains develop. I think a kid at 15 is significantly different from that person who's now 18 or 19. I think the maturation rate, particularly with young men, is kind of staggering what you see happen. But I do think that there's a great potential to expand this. And part of what restorative justice is doing is creating a sense of empathy for the defendant. It allows the defendant to see, here is the impact of my behavior. Here's the impact of my decision. And I agree with Jill. I think this should be looked at to broaden it. Obviously, there are budget constraints, but I think the natural areas work is terrific. Another area that I have long advocated is graffiti cleanup. And I think this ties to folks in the community who want to be volunteers. I don't think you absolutely have to have city staff running these crews. I think it's possible to get people to get involved, to see this piece of it, and to get out there and lead teams and give some life coaching in the meantime. This to me is an area that shouldn't be horribly expensive, but it's got great upside potential, particularly for younger folks.
Thank you, David. So we've come this far. I'm sure you maybe thought you'd get through one of your events without talking about coronavirus in this time that we're going through, but I'm sorry to say that we can't actually deliver that. So our next question, and David, we'll start with you, is what hurdles do you see for the court in the face of COVID-19? And what are your proposed solutions to those hurdles?
I wish I had more solutions. I think coronavirus is going to be with us for a long time. I think we're going to start to normalize wearing masks, for example. I think we're going to look like Tokyo. We're going to look like Beijing, I think, for some time. Some of the impact that we're going to see from coronavirus is we're going to see unemployed people transitioning to become homeless people. I think our homeless population is going to increase, and that is just unfortunate. Another impact that we're going to have is as a result of coronavirus, sales taxes are going to drop off dramatically. I think we will be lucky to maintain current budget. I don't expect we'll be able to. Also, when we get into the new valuation cycle, we're going to see ad valorem tax revenues drop again as real property values drop. This is a big issue. The other kind of on the more micro level is I think people are going to be fearful about coming into court. For example, we often require defendants to sign advisements. And I think somebody can reasonably be fearful about, hey, have you cleaned this pen for me? Or have you cleaned this touch screen for me? I have a fear about my personal health and safety. So I think it's going to be everything from the big picture, the macroeconomic picture, down to someone's reluctance to respond, to be accountable on a citation just because of fear of being additional exposure to this. I think it's going to present a new set of problems. I really do. I think one of the things we'll do is what we're doing right now, which is using technology to connect with people. I think we're going to see a lot more technology solutions. I think we're going to see opportunities come to really leverage this. And I can't say that I know everything that's going to happen. I don't. But having watched this process lately, having watched your city council meeting done remotely, this to me is certainly a piece of the solution on how we're going to respond to this. So I think there's a lot coming our way.
Thank you, David. Go ahead, Jill.
And I referenced this before. We are entering some uncertain times, and it comes with its own challenges. On the positive side, I think that this experience has been one of pushing growth, uncomfortable growth, resilience, and adaptability. And we've learned a lot of lessons about how we can go forward in these times, and how our leadership can step up and lead us. And I think they've demonstrated a lot of care for our community and care for our employees, and I think that's incredible. On a big scale, yes, these are uncertain times economically, and I don't pretend to know whether the economy is going to bounce back next year or next month or 3 or 4 years from now. And I think the city is adjusting its budget practices to acknowledge that uncertainty, and we may have to work within some constraints and do what we can with what we have. But I do think there are a lot of good lessons that we have learned for next time. I think there are going to be additional challenges for our defendants, and I mentioned that before, that we have a population that's experiencing homelessness that has already had a struggle, and we know things like affordable housing are very hard in the city of Fort Collins, and we have people in our community who probably were kind of on the brink, who have now been pushed over that brink because there is going to be higher unemployment, and our small businesses are going to be struggling, and there are going to be a lot of changes coming. And so I think we approach that with optimism, but with pragmatism, and we look at that, and we may have to get creative, and we may have to be understanding and extend timelines and figure out ideas for defendants who are facing new unemployment and need some flexibility and some understanding from the court. I have worked really closely with the court in addressing how do we reopen and how do we do it safely for the community and safely for the staff. One of those things has been installing touch screens, and that was at Ms. Netherton's thing. We've talked about how to do spacing and social distancing in the court. And one of the things I would change is I would stagger our arraignment times so they're not all at the same time and people are not all coming in at 7:30 in the morning and lining up, as well as finding other ways to be flexible with our timing and how we manage our docket.
Thank you, Jill. Difficult times we're in indeed. So just so you both know, and those watching home, we've got 2 questions left identified. So about 10 minutes left. So next question, and Jill, we'll start with you again. This is a follow-up in Zoom again. Each candidate has talked about working collaboratively with the city attorney's office and the police when addressing a number of issues regarding municipal court. Judge Cooke commented on having lunch meetings. Neither of you have suggested including defense counsel stakeholders in these meetings. Do you believe it's important to get the input of that stakeholder, and do you feel it's inappropriate to exclude that stakeholder?
I definitely think that the input of defense counsel is important to everything the court does. We've had some, I think, great feedback on the idea of going forward with probation, and when we had meetings on probation, we did include defense counsel and court-appointed defense counsel in those meetings. Now, I'm not sure whether we need to, I think they would be a welcome part of a sort of committee like Mr. Cooke spoke about, a justice committee, because I think they have valuable insight and a valuable side of things to bring to the table. There's kind of a separation for me, though, when we're talking about, for instance, this legislation is going to affect the city and how is it going to affect our budget. Those tend to be internal conversations with city employees and city departments, because they can sometimes be subjects that we're just talking about the impact here. Not that I wouldn't have those conversations, but maybe there are kind of 2 sets of conversations we can have. I have really found a lot of the defense counsel here in Fort Collins to be incredibly caring, and we share, even though we're on different sides of the courtroom, we share the same goal of wanting to see these individuals succeed and do well. And so I think they would bring a very valuable perspective to the conversation, and they are big stakeholders in municipal court and where we're going, and these ideas we have, like outreach court and wellness court. And I think that they would be a valuable part of that team. So the short answer is yes, I would like to include them in that conversation, but I also think that there are some conversations that we would be having that would be more aimed towards the impact on the city of budget issues and legislation issues that might be a separate conversation.
Thank you, Jill. David?
I think Jill summarized it very nicely. There are going to be conversations that are Fort Collins conversations, particularly about how I may view legislation, things like that. But I have spent a lot of time working with defense counsel. As we saw new legislation a few years ago, that someone who's in custody on a jailable offense, first appearance, is entitled to have an attorney represent them. That's new law. And so we went out and recruited private law firms that we would hire to be court-appointed counsel. And I spent a lot of time talking with them about the obligation that was on the court and how these private attorneys were going to discharge that by working with them on scheduling. And so we would have them in the jail on video Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I just made it a point that there were certain conversations that I think were defense counsel kinds of conversations. But I agree with Jill. I think a lot of these things are really, I would call it city specific or city appropriate. But I think getting their point of view is absolutely valuable. I make it a point to get debriefs from defense counsel from time to time. I make it a point to reach out to them to say, how are you handling this new obligation that's on the court? How does this resonate with you? What are you seeing as far as your needs? Particularly those attorneys who we have over in the jail working with the in-custody defendants. They need to tell us that there's not enough time being allotted to them, that they don't have the resources, that they can't get there on time. I have also worked with the sheriff because I would get pushback occasionally that the docket was taking a long time. So on behalf of the court-appointed counsel, I contacted the sheriff and said, we're going to need to find a way to give adequate time. These defendants are entitled. They have meaningful representation. But I think Jill hit that pretty well. I think these are not always the same conversation, but I think defense counsel is certainly an important stakeholder to understand their point of view.
Thank you both. So as we enter our last question here, before I turn it back over to the mayor for some closing comments, I just want to thank you both for being here again tonight. I know the mayor will do that as well. I will say that I did not have to interject for either one of you to cut you off. So I appreciate your timeliness, and I will say that does not always happen. So our final question is there anything else you would like to share with us tonight that you've not been able to do so? So David, we'll go with you first.
Well, I think it's pretty evident as you listen to Jill and you listen to me, we both got great passion for this job. I'm extremely excited about this opportunity, about what I've learned as a judge, what I've learned as a member of the municipal judge community in Colorado. That has influenced me greatly, that has helped me greatly, and I think becoming a better judge and staying a good judge and effective judge. One thing when I was talking with the mayor at one point, I said, Mayor, if you appoint me to this, I'm bringing with me this association of municipal judges from across the state. I'm bringing with me this thought leadership to keep us at the leading edge, to keep us really out of trouble for sure, but to keep us complying with the law so that we're doing what is required. So I'm just very excited about this. I think it's just great opportunity here. So no, I appreciate the questions that I've had an opportunity to answer. I certainly look at this as just the capstone of a career. There's nothing I would rather do than have this opportunity with Fort Collins. This just fits me like a glove, whether it's the vision and value statements of the community, whether it's the conversations I've had with your elected officials and your department heads and other employees. I just really love everything I'm seeing here. It resonates with me personally, and I'm very excited about this opportunity.
Thank you, David. Jill, go ahead.
First, I want to say, I think there's a reason that Fort Collins has only had 2 municipal judges. in the last 60+ years, and that's because it's an incredible community and it's an incredible place to work, and I have fallen in love with working for the city of Fort Collins. There was one subject that wasn't touched on, and I think it's a really important subject for judicial officers today, and that's the issue of implicit bias. That's one of the things that I am really cognizant of as a judge, and that I want to bring to the fore is being really honest about that. I had a great trainer at the city who said implicit bias is when our actions are not aligned with our endorsed beliefs. And I certainly know Mr. Cooke and I share the belief that bias has absolutely no place in the courtroom, and that's bias of any kind, any shape, any form. So if I'm selected, here's what I pledge to the city. I will put every ounce of my energy into this job, into being fair and just and equitable, and to be inclusive. I will be brutally self-honest with myself about my biases and making sure that they do not interfere with me making fair decisions. I will ask for accountability from those around me and from this community to hold me to the highest standards of integrity. And I will continue to seek out trainings and continually improve and be vigilant to make sure that this court is doing the very best job it can for this community, and that I am doing the very best to be as fair and as just as possible in what is a fallible human system. And I welcome feedback, and I want to serve the community in this capacity.
Thank you, Jill. And thank you both. So at this time, I'll invite Mayor Troxell back in to give us some closing comments. Mayor?
Thank you, Tyler, and thank you for a great job moderating tonight. And on behalf of the City Council, I'd like to thank Jill and David for their time tonight, and to all of you that have joined us on this panel and this interview tonight. And as Tyler pointed out a number of times, a link to offer feedback to our finalists can be found at rcity.fcgov.com/chief-feedback on our finalists, and that can be found at the Fort Collins website. The council has plans to discuss the finalists and to consider a resolution at our next city council meeting, which is April 28th. And so that will be when we will be considering the next chief judge for Fort Collins. So with that, I'd like to thank all of you that have participated here tonight, and our two candidates, outstanding finalist candidates. Thank you very much, and good night, Fort Collins.